I know I tried to make myself sound sophisticated and like I'm above trends, but this time I just have to be honest. I love overpowered characters. It's basic, I know, but I just have to be honest. They walk into scenes and immediately the entire tone shifts. The music changes as their score starts playing, and this week's jobber villain, who exists solely to demonstrate how cool they are, starts shitting themselves. These characters don't just win fights, they literally clip farm, like you'll be seeing compilations of the battle months after the anime has ended. And of course, audiences, including me, will eat it up. Though, eventually, there will come a time when one question begins to creep in. Why should I be invested in the conflict of this series when I know this character can instantly resolve any plot point? In that way, an overpowered character is actually a double-edged sword. They can elevate the story to greatness, creating a fan favorite that carries the fandom for generations, while at the same time suffocating the rest of the plot. And therein lies the power problem. How does a writer get rid of this fan favorite character without ruining the story or alienating the audience? Well, it's my job to tell you how to do that, so in this video, we're going to break down why overpowered characters are so appealing, how they can become a problem, and most importantly, the best and worst ways to write them out of a narrative. So without further ado, let's begin. So what exactly makes a character overpowered? This varies from genre to genre, but for a battle series, it's usually quite simple. The character possesses overwhelming strength when compared to the current cast of characters at that point in the series. Do know that there is a massive difference between a character who is strong and one who is overpowered. Specifically that while a strong character is still bound by the rules of tension, conflict, and growth, an overpowered character is not. Overpowered characters reverse tension, moving it from the side of protagonist and giving it to the antagonist. They solve conflicts through their sheer existence, and unless they're going up against the very final antagonist of a series, the only logical progression of growth for an overpowered character is downwards. Essentially, these characters don't face challenges, they are the challenge. And because of the satisfaction of flipping that dynamic on its head, we as the audience love them. But that high can't last forever, because once the audience knows they're unbeatable, so does the story. And that's where the problems begin. The first thing you lose are your stakes. If one character can end every fight, then where does the suspense come in? Villains can't feel like threats when you know this single character can blink every single problem away. Next, your supporting cast will suffer. Writers have a hard enough time letting their side characters stay relevant, but with an overpowered character, this problem becomes even worse. Everyone else becomes dead weight, literally and narratively speaking. It's an all too common trope for these kinds of characters to prefer fighting alone, sometimes even risking their allies' lives just by fighting close to them. And the final issue is the story's immersion. Eventually, you'll find that the plot begins inventing excuses to sideline them. It's the usual shtick of, oh, they're away on a holiday, or oh, they're on a different mission, while the most important events in your story will be going on. The plot bends itself backwards just to keep them away, not always because it makes sense, but because literally nothing of importance can happen if they're around. So if the character can't grow, can't lose, and can't be logically present, what can you do? Well, you only have two options: reinvent them or remove them. And that's where things get tricky. So, how do you get rid of an overpowered character? Well, most writers land on one of three approaches. Some graceful, some not so much. Solution 1. Let them pass the torch down. This is by far the cleanest method. The character doesn't exactly die, at least not for the time being, but instead they retire. This solution usually gives the story time to process and react to the loss of the character, while also doing a good job to satisfy the story's fans. Although it does require having a plausible solution to nerf the character, if done properly, it is by far one of the better methods. Solution 2. You guessed it, just kill them. This is by far the boldest method. Killing the overpowered character is shocking and a wonderful way to raise the stakes. Just be aware that this requires an equally overpowered antagonist to pull off, and usually a massive show of spectacle, so pulling this out on someone who isn't the final antagonist is a pretty risky move. You also risk alienating a massive part of your audience by permanently taking out a fan favorite. So just make sure there's an appropriate build up to the event before you pull it off. Solution 3, and honestly the one I like the least, is to just gradually nerf them. You never actually get rid of the character in a formal way. You simply pile on injuries, weaknesses, or disabilities until the character's strength is roughly around the rest of the cast. Whatever the case, they are still around, but the plot simply doesn't revolve around them as much. Because there's no moment of spectacle, you really can't use this to service a story's themes as much as a death or retirement would have, making it the weakest option. Each method has its own strengths and risks. Pull them off well, and your audience will be more than satisfied. Mess them up, and you get backlash, dropped arcs, and let's be real, a couple of death threats. So let's look at who did it well and who didn't. If you want a masterclass in removing an overpowered character without ruining the story, look no further than All Might. From the moment he's introduced into My Hero Academia, we get the sense that this is a walking legend. All Might is faster than the eye can see and capable of changing the weather with singular punches alone. For a while, he's both a safety net for the characters and the audience. Already though, we get to see some of the problems his existence brings. He's conveniently late for the training at the USJ and essentially resolves that entire arc with just his arrival, albeit with a good amount of struggle. But Horikoshi does something brilliant to combat this. From the moment All Might is introduced, he shows us that his time is already ticking down. His injuries are catching up to him, and over the course of the series, his power will only continue to fade. Instead of dragging this out, the story leans into it. All Might doesn't just lose his powers in the middle of a meaningless arc. Horikoshi decides to make a spectacle out of it. All for One versus All Might is one of the greatest battles across the entire series, giving us a horrifying look into the series' final antagonists, as well as what makes All Might the man he chooses to be. And with its conclusion, All Might's exit doesn't weaken the story, but instead only fuels it. Horikoshi ensures his absence had actual weight and that his legacy had purpose. The audience doesn't feel robbed by his departure, they feel moved. That is the gold standard. That is how you take an overpowered character, a fan favorite, and turn their departure into the most emotional and thematic centerpiece across your entire story. All Might's character, from beginning to end, is used perfectly in service to highlight the story's themes and narrative. He's not just overpowered for the sake of it. The story simply wouldn't exist in its current state without a character like him. Now we have to talk about what happens when it doesn't work. Of course, not every overpowered character can have an exit as graceful as All Might's. Sometimes the removal is a lot more contentious. Let's start with arguably the most popular case of this, Satoru Gojo. Spoilers for Jujutsu Kaisen. Technically, Gojo was actually removed from the story twice, and with a single glance at his character, one can immediately understand the reasoning for this. Gojo wasn't simply strong, he was literally untouchable. Half of the entire plot of Jujutsu Kaisen is just the villains coming up with ideas to contain him. And he wasn't just a fan favorite, he was single-handedly one of the most pivotal forces driving the series' popularity. This places Gege in an insanely difficult writing position. Not only is this the fan favorite, he has also given Gojo a set of abilities that make him almost impossible to kill. Any writer would have struggled when placed into that position, and I think honestly, Gege did the best thing that he could have. Gojo's initial ceiling was spectacularly done. It wasn't as much as a spectacle as maybe it should have been, but still set up easily one of the best arcs across the entire series. You won't find many fans complaining about Gojo's ceiling in the prison realm, but Gojo's actual death is where it gets more tricky. See, while Sukuna vs Gojo is easily the best fight across the entire series in terms of spectacle, the actual ending leaves a lot to be desired. Unlike All Might, who gets to strike a pose and make a speech before being taken out the story, Gojo dies off-screen. No real goodbye, no closure for the students who idolized him. He's literally killed between chapters. Whether you think it was bold or reckless, or say a sudden death is part of the themes of the story, his execution still felt hollow. Even when the plot gets a chance to slow down near the end, there's no formal send-off for Gojo's character. We just move on and keep the fights going, and it's easy to see why so many fans were disappointed by this. I'm going to be blunt, Gojo made Jujutsu Kaisen. The two are inseparable, and it's sad to see such a phenomenal character being sent off like he was. Even if you can't dwell on his death during the fight, at least give him a burial scene during the epilogue or anything. And then there's the other case, where the overpowered character doesn't get killed off, but it might have been better if they did. Enter Levi Ackerman. From the moment Levi appears in Attack on Titan, he is a force of nature. The series up until this point has mostly focused on humans desperately trying to survive against the imposing threats of Titans. Levi is the only human character in the story who doesn't seem to be prey for the Titans. If anything, they should be terrified of him. And for a long time that worked. Fans loved Levi, and he was a reliable last line of defense, a human who stood on par or perhaps even above Titan shifters. But the deeper Attack on Titan dove into its final arcs, the harder it became to justify keeping Levi around at full strength. So what happened? No, he didn't die, but he was instead nerfed into irrelevance. He gets caught in a blast, loses his fingers, ends up in a wheelchair, and spends most of the final arc on the sideline. It's not that Levi needed to go out in a blaze of glory, but his exit from the spotlight felt more like a quiet fade than a meaningful conclusion. And sure, you could argue it's realistic. Not every hero dies dramatically, but from a narrative standpoint, I definitely would have liked to see him dive headfirst into a row of colossal titans as much as I did with Hanji. In a way, it's the opposite of Gojo. Instead of being removed from the story too fast, Levi was constantly kept around, almost like a crutch until he passed his purpose. And that's the other side of the problem. Sometimes the question isn't how you get rid of an overpowered character, it's why you didn't. Overpowered characters are one of the most thrilling tools in storytelling. They give the audience a sense of spectacle that can hardly be matched by anything else. But all power does come with a cost. If not handled carefully, these characters can swallow the story they're meant to support. They flatten tension, overshadow development, and force writers into awkward corners where the only escape is a rushed exit. That's why removing an overpowered character is more than just a plot decision. It's a narrative responsibility. Do it well and you deepen your world, raise the stakes, and elevate your remaining cast. Do it poorly and you risk alienating your audience, cheapening your themes, and worst of all, making it feel like your story peaked before it was ready. So whether you're a writer making your own stories, or a fan trying to understand why certain stories hit harder than others, just remember, it's not just about how strong a character is and what kind of abilities they have access to, it's about what that strength leaves behind. Thank you for watching. Have any favorite overpowered characters? Feel free to drop them down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed, remember to like the video and subscribe. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.